Okay, so usually when I'm on abortion forums or looking around in comments sections, there's always one person who comes out and says, why couldn't the woman just keep her legs shut? Why couldn't she wait till marriage? Why was she having this sex that led to this unwanted baby? So let's talk about that. Approximately 3% of the general population manages to stay a virgin until marriage. Woohoo, good for them. If you're looking specifically at conservative religious groups, that number jumps to about 20%, generally more women than men. So it's not impossible. A lot of people seem to think that it's impossible. It's really, really not. It was more frequently done in the 1950s because somebody went back and looked. But that was only like 1 in every 10 people at that point. I think it's gotten harder. I think it's gotten harder, and I think that that's because of society. Like, I look at the success of conservative religious people who managed to hold on to their virginity until marriage. And I think one of the reasons they're so successful isn't necessarily just their conservative religious views, but the conservative religious subculture in which they live. There's reinforcement and support for those views, which makes it much easier to hold on to them. For myself, I grew up in a small and geographically very isolated location. And so I went to the local churches and I tried dating around in the local churches, and I was very conservatively raised, conservative, sheltered, over sheltered, you can say that. The rules were no dating until you're 18, and when you do start dating, don't have sex before you get married. And my parents had not had sex until they got married, and they vouched, very strongly for the benefits of that. And before I go too much farther, there are benefits. Like, people actually are out there in the world arguing that there aren't benefits to staying a virgin until marriage, and that's just, there are benefits. One of the ones that I found, like, I wasn't paying too much attention to it because that's not really the focus of this video, but greater sexual satisfaction with your partner. That's always a big one. People like sex. And I mean, you don't need to have sex with an entire crowd of people to have really satisfying sex. If you can find one person to have satisfying sex with, you don't need anybody else. Like, it's one of those, 2-person kinds of activities that, doesn't require anything more than that. So yeah, but I grew up in this geographically isolated location. Tried dating around in the local churches. I tried out multiple different churches in my town. I did not find what I was looking for there. I started dating at 18 because dating until you're 18, all that. And about the time I turned 20, I was pretty thoroughly discouraged because I wasn't dating, because I wasn't finding anybody. And it wasn't that I was specifically looking for guys in the churches. It was just, I had this problem, and I should probably talk about that. Every time I would meet a new guy or start talking to a new guy, with this possibility of dating looming over me, conversations turned to sex very, very quickly. And, I would tell them, hey, I'm not going to be having sex with you because I was really hoping to keep my virginity until marriage. And their eyes would just light up, and it would be like, oh, I've never had a virgin before. It's like, oh, I've never had Korean food before. It must be tasty. It's like, no. The point of being a virgin until marriage is you don't just hand it away to the first person who asks you for it. And it became very inconvenient because I tried to form a relationship with a guy, any dude, and right away they'd ask for sex. I'd tell them no because I was trying to stay a virgin until I was married. They'd start you know, their eyes would light up, and that was the only thing they thought about after that. It's like, I've got to have that virgin. Like, this is a new experience. It's an exotic treat. I'm going to have it. And it's like, try forming a relationship with a guy when all they think about is just banging you. Like, suddenly it's like waving something shiny in front of their eyes. Like, that's all they care about. It was really frustrating. And about the time I was 20, by that point, I had pretty well figured it's more of a hindrance than a help. I didn't know that, I did not know, and I don't know if the statistics were out at that point, that waiting until marriage leads to greater sexual satisfaction, because I think I might have held on then a little longer. You know, fast forward a year from there, I've become an exotic dancer. And that's probably a stumbling block. Like, if I talk about abortion, if I talk about morality, if I talk about anything that has to do with morality, the first thing people are going to probably do is look back at my job history and say, oh my God, you know, she doesn't have the right to weigh in on anything regarding morality. You know, how dare you? What can I say? Stereotypes do exist for a reason, but not everybody is a stereotype. I got into the business because I had an interesting life. I had a lot of health problems and I needed to get into shape, and I wanted to learn how to dance, but I couldn't afford dance classes. And also I had some social problems, very, very sheltered, very, very isolated. And I needed to meet new people. I needed to make friends. And honestly, I needed to meet guys too. Like, I needed to hang out at a bar. Basically, I needed to hang out at a bar a lot because the churches weren't working for me. And I needed to make friends, and I needed to hopefully find a partner. And I was not going to do that in the situation that I was in, which I was working on an ambulance. Oh God, the only way I was ever going to meet a nice guy is if he came in as a patient. And by that point, it's like, sir, I know you're hemorrhaging to death, but can I have your phone number? Yeah, that wasn't going to work. And coworkers, you know, no available coworkers either. Just me. I needed to go to a bar. Like, that was pretty much my last ditch effort to, you know, build up some normal social skills, because I was a little bit weird and eccentric, and I talked to a priest once at one point, you know, years and years down the road. I talked to a priest and I told him about my life, and when I was done telling him about my life, he kind of looks at me, he's like, you've had a violent life. And I just kind of looked at it like, I wouldn't go that far, you know. It wasn't that violent. I mean, it was kind of violent. There were some violent-ish things that happened. But I mean, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, but it was definitely something. I did not grow up with a normal childhood, and I'm happy about that, because nobody should have to have the childhood I had. But socially, I was a little bit off, and I needed to work on that, and I knew it. And it was like, well, how do you work on that? Well, you grit your teeth, you go to a bar, and you make yourself talk to people every single damn night until you get good at it. And I don't drink, so it was like, well, you know, I'll go to the bar, I'll be a dancer. I'll get my exercise in, I'll start rebuilding my health, because my body was shot after everything I'd been through. It was like ruined. So I'll start working on my health and dancing and trying to rebuild some muscle and heal myself. And I will start talking to people and heal myself. And what do you know? It worked. It worked. But yeah, I started going to the bar and started dancing, and I ran into this girl from my church from long ago who, you know, it was a small town, it was a geographically isolated location, so sooner or later people would get bored and filter into the strip club. And she showed up one night and I saw her and I was like, hey, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, hi. And we start talking and eventually she tells me she's still a virgin. I was like, oh, good for you. You know, you held on to it. That's awesome. She's like, it's a problem because you can't tell guys that you're a virgin. You can't tell your date that you're a virgin because the moment they hear it, that's all they care about. That's all they want. They don't want a relationship with you. They just want to have sex with you. And I was like, yeah, I know what that's like. I know what that's like because I got rid of mine. Like, it wasn't a romantic process, my whole deflowering. I was 20 years old. I was pretty much losing hope. I looked at it, it was like, this is more of a hindrance than a help. I can't form relationships with people, partially because I have serious trust issues, but partially because every time I talk to a guy, that's all they care about. The moment they find out, that's all they want. So I got together with this guy and he had a pulse. And that was pretty much it. It's like, you're a dude with a pulse. Okay, here we go. You know, you're alive and you're of a legal age. So, you know, he was older than me. So, you know, not much. Just, I think he was like 3 years older than me. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You know, and I thought about it pretty long and hard and it was like, well, here we go. We'll get rid of this and it will be one less obstacle to me finding a mate. And that's a horrible way to look at it, but that's really what I eventually looked at it as, because for me, in my situation, maintaining my virginity was no problem at all. There was no struggle there. Finding a mate, that wasn't particularly likely. I looked into my future quite a bit, and like, not looked into my future, like see a crystal ball kind of looked at, but I thought about, you know, where am I going and what's going on with my life and where is all this leading to? And every single time I saw myself, you know, living in my mom's basement with too many cats. That was my destiny. That was what I was going to end up doing. I wasn't going to find any, you know, it was the middle of nowhere. Prince Charming wasn't coming to rescue me from this place. So, you know, I did all the conventional things you're supposed to do, and then as they failed on me one after the other, I started trying the unconventional things, which eventually led me to a strip club, which worked. You know, whatever works, ultimately, whatever works. I find it pretty frustrating that our culture does not necessarily encourage people to maintain their virginity. It would be better if people did. It would be better. I think, well, let's see. The thing that I was reading in that article talking about the benefits of waiting until marriage, you know, I tried to avoid too many of the articles that quoted lots of scripture at me. Not that the scripture is such a bad thing, and if you believe in it, like religiously believe in it, your chances of succeeding are much higher. I wanted the scientific facts. That's what I was looking for. So this one article I was reading through, they were talking about one of the reasons that they think postponing sex until after marriage is so successful is because the couple has more of a chance to bond and communicate with each other and form a successful relationship before emphasizing sex at all. And I thought that was awesome. I think that's how it, like, obviously that's how it works. I think that's how it works. I look at my own relationship with my husband and how we would just spend hours and hours and hours talking, and we were so interested in the conversation we were having with each other that sex didn't enter into the picture until after some time had passed, and we had had hours and hours and hours of conversation about so many things. You need to be able to build a relationship before you start, you know, before you have sex, you know, before sex becomes part of the relationship. And that brings me back to my frustration earlier with trying to maintain my virginity until marriage. And you can't tell people that you're staying a virgin until marriage, because then the only thing they think about is sex. But when you meet somebody new, many times all they think about is sex. It's like this horrible catch-22. It's terribly frustrating. You know, terribly frustrating. So I don't know what kind of advice I could give to people. Like, I know what my friend did. She just hid the fact. She didn't tell people. When she dated a new guy, she wouldn't mention it. But then at some point it gets kind of awkward because the guy wants to have sex with you and you've been dating for a while, and it's like sooner or later you have to let the cat out of the bag. And hopefully you do that after you've formed a solid enough relationship with that person that they're not going to just go jumping up and down like an excited schoolboy saying, "Yay, I get to have a virgin," because that's irritating as hell and it's not good for the relationship. And it's like, again, if you're religious and you have a religious subculture around you that reinforces those goals for you, you're much more likely to succeed. And if you aren't religious or you don't have a religious subculture, I think one of the reasons that it's so difficult is because there's really not much in the way of cultural support for people who do want to be a virgin until they get married. And it's really good for you. So I don't know. It's frustrating. Like, and maybe that's just my own, I mean, I'm sure that my own biases play in here. I mean, I know that for many people who are trying to stay virgins until marriage, they just get excited, you know. Oh God, I have one friend. She was comically hypocritical. She was one of the church girls, comically hypocritical person. Like, she was a mess. And she got together with this guy while we were still in high school. And I remember she was telling a bunch of her friends, and I was not really one of her friends. Like, I was not really many people's friend at all. I was just kind of this shadow hanging out in the periphery of any social group that I was a member of. But I remember walking up while she was talking with a bunch of her friends, her actual friends, and telling them about how she and her boyfriend got to a point where they were digging around the house looking for something that they could use as a contraceptive, and ultimately, like, they were looking at saran wrap and seeing if that wouldn't work as a condom. And I just remember, sitting there and thinking, please tell me you didn't actually use saran wrap as a contraceptive. Like, no, please tell me that's not what you you did. So yeah, I think I'm probably going to end up doing another video soon on contraceptives and contraceptive methods. Because, you know, unwanted pregnancies, if you have contraceptives going for you, then your chances of an unwanted pregnancy are greatly reduced. If you stay a virgin till marriage, your chances of an unwanted pregnancy are greatly reduced. I would say that it is probably wise to familiarize yourself with some contraceptives so you don't end up like my friend who was scrounging around in the kitchen. But, you know, oh well, people are interesting. They're very interesting. I'll talk to you guys later.